everybody. How are you? I'm Dr. Deb, and it is Thursday night, so we are going to get started with our broadcast, our regular participant live, which means I want you guys to participate. It says participants here, and that's why I said the word because I was looking at it. But it doesn't have a list of who's here, which I guess is good for everyone because it keeps them anonymous. But I always say, please talk to me. Participate so that I'm not talking to myself. Okay. I actually came up with more than 16 examples of covert abuse. But before I get into it, I want to make a disclaimer. The word abuse is a behavior. It is not meant to hang up on a tree the bad guy who's doing the abuse. Why is that? Why isn't, in my opinion, an abusive person or a person who behaves abusively a bad guy? The reality is that every single time I have a couple walking in my door who one accuses the other person of being abusive, what I have found is that both people, the so-called victim and the so-called abuser, have had parents who were abusive. And every single time I track back the parents, either by meeting them or just hearing from the children their stories, I learn they couldn't help themselves because they were abused. And I would say the same is probably true for my own grandparents, who must have behaved abusively to some of my aunts and uncles and my parents because of the behaviors that I hear about or heard about. But when you put the story in the context of their history, well, guess what? It goes back to the previous generation. Now, does that mean you can't stop it because it's always going to be passed down? No, of course. That's what this is for. This is for stopping that chain of abuse going down the map from one generation to another. Okay? So I want you to understand what it is so that you can stop it, but there's no blame here. I assure you, every abuser was abused in some way or another. And sometimes the form of abuse, and that's what tonight's talk is about, is so subtle that the person who is just a fly on the wall, an observer, doesn't even see it, doesn't even know what was happening, why it was abusive, or that it even was. So we're going to go through the whole list, hopefully, and pick apart everything so that you can understand what was abusive. Now, what I would like you to do, please chime in with your own examples, your own questions. If you don't agree with something I've said, tell me. I love it. I don't want to be always agreed with. It's great to have a conversation which grows people's awareness of all the possibilities. And that includes mine. I love it. I love learning and growing, and I learn and grow mostly from my clients, sometimes from the books I read. All right. So here's one: sharing personal information in public. Now, I don't mean that somebody will stand on a street corner or publish something in the newspaper, but more like a family dinner where you have aunts and uncles and cousins sitting around the table, or not even a family, but close friends. Let's say 4 couples are out to dinner or something. And somebody will say, well, Caroline just lost her job. Now, let me ask you a question. If Caroline did not expect you to say that, and you said it, what's abusive about that? It certainly sounds unabusive, which is why I'm calling it covert. But what is abusive about it? You tell me. I see there's a bunch of people there, so please chat in. What's abusive about sharing somebody else's personal information at the dinner table, in front of friends or family, close friends even? Here's another one that I've heard about. A person could share personal information that is their own personal information, and you would think the spouse wouldn't care, but they might. For example, I've heard this. A man says to their couples out, I have erectile dysfunction. You think, okay, he's just sharing his personal, but his wife is sitting right there. And somebody's saying, yes, it's embarrassing her. It certainly is. But let's say her leaving her job, let's say, I'll make an argument, it wasn't embarrassing. She isn't embarrassed by it. But he is telling over something that he didn't ask for her permission to do. So I'm going to give you a little thing, and you guys can write this down because I think it's useful information if you haven't heard the term. There is something called a power differential, a difference in the amount of power two people have, one versus the other. So the person with the information that is to be shared implicitly has more power than the other one, violating her by sharing personal information without permission. But what's the violation here is that he is, well, you're right, without the power difference, you're right. It's a violation in the sense of like disrobing her. He's violating her personal, not physical space, but personal informational space. Yes, that's true. You're right. And then I'm adding this power differential in a different sense, that when you can share information, then it takes away the other person's ability to share information, which gives you power and took it away from them. I'll give you a silly example. Two kids are not even kids, it could be grown-ups. Two people are arguing because somebody told somebody else, we're making you a birthday party or a birthday cake. Well, you weren't supposed to tell. It's not a violation in the sense of sharing something personal, but you now have the power because you were the one who told instead of that one. And I know that sounds maybe silly, but it really is the way human nature works, that the person who did the revealing of the information is thought by the listener to have more clout or more inside, and that gives them power, especially telling it when they weren't given permission. They really have power. And I guess, yeah, what you said here, violating is a way of taking power over somebody. So keep in mind this power differential as I go through the list so that you can see where that may come in. And I'm asking all of you, one brave person decided to chime in, but please, everyone, chime in. Here's another one. Complimenting a member of the opposite sex, but not the spouse, in front of the spouse. Oh, that's a beautiful dress. And anytime one person gives someone a compliment, that is actually exercising power, if you think about it. we all have the power to control another person's feelings. So if you compliment someone, then it makes it clear that you've withheld that compliment from someone else. And that hurts. That takes away their position in your life. So that's number 2. Making decisions. Number 3, making decisions on behalf of the spouse without getting the spouse's opinion. Now, I had a case of someone making a decision about his own business without asking his wife her permission. Now, listen to this one. The husband's position on why he did it is because he feels controlled if he tells her his decision and she vetoes it. But she feels controlled if he doesn't share with her his decision and spends money, because the balance of the budget affects the whole family. So I think maybe you could see there that you always are affected in some way by someone else's decisions. And so that affects that balance of power right there. So that was number 3. Number 4. Okay. Put downs are very often, or most of the time, put downs are obvious. They're not covert, they're overt, like you're stupid. But see, there is such a thing as a put down that is disguised as being kind. And I've seen this a lot. I've experienced it a lot, where somebody will say, I took care of X because that's not what you're good at. Now, sometimes it's okay with the spouse to recognize we have a division of labor and I am not good at changing the oil on the car. I don't know what that's about. I have enough problems of my own to run the house, my end of the responsibilities. But when that's what you're not good at, is something we should all be good at and we should all take responsibility for, then it becomes a put down. So for an example, I balanced the checkbook and paid the bills because that's not something you're good at. Well, that could be a little embarrassing to a person because they should theoretically be good at balancing the checkbook. And nowadays, nobody bothers to do it. We assume that our little app is going to do it for us. But anything along that line, I'm not a lawyer, but I read the legal document of our new bank loan. And I know you can't do that. So I did it for you. That would be an example. I'm not a lawyer. Why am I so smart? How come you can't do it? See? Where there should be a balance of power, somehow it gets unbalanced. Am I making myself clear here, or am I talking myself into gobbledygook? Please tell me. I don't know if there's a delay here, but okay. All right, maybe. All right, I'll just go on. Hopefully I'm making sense. Okay, number 5, false accusations. So, for an example, I heard this recently. An aunt told a child, you're a liar, or you're lying, or you always lie. I don't remember the exact terminology. The person was 8 years old. It did not feel like that was fair, but didn't say anything because there was a power differential there. It's a little kid versus an aunt. Plus, it was said in public, and the kid was embarrassed. I actually feel that that kind of language is so strong, it's not covert anymore, it's overt, and it is abusive, especially in front of a crowd of people. You know, they were still family, but whatever. It's abusive. Here's the thing, though. You can make a false accusation which sounds like it's reasonable, and it's not. Let's take an example. Suppose a person, let's say a couple, the husband does all the cooking. He's the good cook, and I've seen families like that. And the stove fell apart, and they had a person come, a repair person, who said it's not worth repairing. Let's go ahead and replace the stove. And I'm using a stove as an example because my stove just did the same thing not long ago, but they did fix it. But let's say it was not fixable. And now the wife comes along and says, it's so difficult to keep up with the expenses in this house. I work so hard. And then I get thrown by ridiculous off the charts expenses like a stove. What's she doing? That is a false accusation. Why? Because she's accusing her husband, who needed the new stove, of frivolously throwing money away when that was not true, because you need a stove. She benefits from the stove, right? If he cooks, she eats. And I purposely changed the gender because I'm kind of tired of hearing it's always the woman cooking and the man earning money. There are a lot of women who earn money very well and make more than their husbands. So I just changed the genders of the stereotypes. But that is a false accusation because it wasn't frivolous. And if it's difficult to balance expenses, I get that. But there's no reason to make an underhanded dig at the partner. Does anybody want to say anything here? Okay. Number 6, mind reading. Any mind reading by any person is covert because anyone listening doesn't realize that it's abusive. When someone says, I know what you're thinking, or no, that wasn't the reason you did that. The reason you did that really was whatever. That's mind reading. My reaction to that is, how dare you? How dare you have the nerve to think you could get in someone else's head? Defaming your character behind your back, yeah, but never addressing anything to you personally. Ooh, that's another one. That isn't even on my list. Wow. That's covert to you because you didn't know about it. You didn't know that it was happening. Wow. That's terrible. Yeah. That's interesting. I was thinking in terms of covert to the audience, but yeah, to the person themselves. Well, cheating would be in that category too. If you cheat and the person doesn't know it, that is abuse. And if you keep it under wraps, I guess, yeah, covert abuse. Good point. So we had number 6, mind reading, and now you're adding one that was not on my list, number 7, defaming someone behind their back and you never knew it. So now my number 7 is going to really become 8. And that is being negative, always contradicting the person. No, that's not what happened. Let me tell my story. This is my version, but it's not true. Don't you want the facts? Excuse me, but it is true according to how I see it. See, when people contradict each other, they're negative with each other, what they don't realize is that we all remember things differently. What stands up for us, let's say you went to a movie and you saw it 3 times. Different parts would jump out at you each of those 3 times as something completely new that you didn't notice the first 2 times. That's normal. So it's not possible for 2 people to be present and see exactly the same thing happening. So there's no reason for someone to contradict the other person. They both saw something different or experienced something different. Now you could say, no, it was really on April 20th. No, it was on March 20th. It was a month ago. Well, maybe you could check that thing out on the calendar. That is a difference that might be, based on real fact. That could be. But if you keep on doing that to your spouse, that becomes abuse because you're always right and they're always wrong. And that, again, has a power differential. How are you always right? That's not possible. You're human, they're human. Come on. Okay, so that was number 8. Number 9, rejection. I was just reading something that was refreshing me. I was reading my own dissertation. Someone's parents didn't come to their graduation. Why? They said it was because they didn't like the school that the adult child went to, the college. Well, excuse me, you didn't like the school, so you didn't go to the graduation? That's rejection on a low level. That's covert rejection. A person who hears the story thinks, oh, it's really because they didn't like the school, like they said. No, you're rejecting the child whose graduation you didn't come to. As the person said in my dissertation, why couldn't he get over himself and just come for me? But that didn't happen. Number 10, blame. Blame is big. There is so much obvious, overt, blame. What would happen when the blame is so low-key, not even stated outright, that it looks like it's not abuse at all? So again, I was rereading my dissertation for this. This goes back a lot of years, but it was all good stuff. Somebody said that the father had a nervous breakdown and he was in a very bad place mentally. And I need for you, the child, the grown-up child, I guess it was a college-age student, to pack your bags and never come home again. Well, that one is overt rejection, right? Don't come back. But there's covert blame. Your father had a nervous breakdown and it's your fault. That's why you can't come home again. Excuse me, but maybe the father needs to deal with his stuff. He's the parent. He's supposed to know how to control the situation in his house and raise his kid properly. What's going on here? So that was a covert form of blame. Okay, number 11, criticism. So the argument why we should criticize someone is to let them know what they need to know. That's the argument. you teach a kid what they have to do differently. So they shouldn't do this, they should do that. We need to capitalize a T at the beginning of every sentence. This one here is a new sentence. It doesn't have a capital, therefore it has to have a capital. It's wrong. So yeah, we have to criticize when we have to. But there are two problems. And this is the same with the spouse. There are two problems. One is the amount. If you're a perfectionist and you're always criticizing and you never find anything good or positive, it's always negative, always a criticism, it adds up. No spouse should live like that. John Gottman, who is mostly a behaviorist, but that's okay, did a lot of research on what makes marriages click and what makes them end. He had people, I've mentioned this before, come to his love lab, which was an apartment that the university had rented out for the research. And every single room had a camera, video camera, except the bathroom and the bedroom for privacy. And people would volunteer for a weekend. And they would run the tapes continuously in every room and then analyze it. And you can imagine, after 10 years, how many thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of video they had gone through. And what they basically found is that you just can't do this. You can't keep criticizing with no positive. For every 5 positives, you're allowed 1 negative. It's not the reverse. If it is going to be the reverse, the marriage isn't going to last. So the amount is too much. And let's say there isn't any actual overt criticism. Let's say no one says you need to capitalize your T, that was a lowercase and it needs to be. But there's no praise either. There's no, wow, that's good. I like that. You did that right. That was helpful to me. Nothing like that. So either too much negative or no positive. In other words, there's no such thing as neutrality being okay. A person can't just not say anything positive and say this is a neutral marriage. It's not. The absence of positive becomes a negative, unlike math. Do you follow how that works? And by the way, people watching this later on should definitely comment in the comments if you have questions or you disagree with something or you want to add something. I made a cake for someone, and I wasn't sure it tasted so great. I wanted encouragement, and I asked one of the guests, not the person I made it for, how it was. I thought maybe it was a little dry. And this person said it was okay. And my heart sank. Oh, no. To me, it was okay as it was a rotten, stinking cake, because you don't make a cake for someone that's going to be okay. If it's not good, it's not good. There's good and there's horrible. There's no in between. Not for a gift, not for something special. Making sense here? Oh, no, I only have a minute. We're going to go over just a little bit, guys. Okay. Number 12, 10, 12. Threats that are veiled. An obvious threat is not covert anymore, right? You know, if you tell your spouse, I'm going to hit you, that's real abuse, obvious, anyone could see it. The idea of covert is somebody else watching doesn't realize that it's abuse. And you may not realize it's abuse, like the case that was pointed out before of defaming your character behind your back. So if you say to someone, listen, I know you want to go to Mexico, but we can't afford this trip because there's been too much spending. I mean, you just bought that oven. Going back to my oven example. So there's a threat there. It's not only a blame or a criticism or a false accusation, is a criticism. I'm taking away from you because I have the money. I'm taking away from you your trip because you spent here or you're gonna spend here. Imagine a person who needs the oven and that the house can't function with a non-working oven. And you don't buy the oven because you want the trip. Well, that's not fair to the whole family, as well as to yourself. But that would be a threat, a veiled threat. Number 13, telling over half a story, which makes the other person look bad. So for an example, you say to them, you made me so angry when you said X, Y, and Z. That's why I reacted so badly. Well, the half of the, and I've heard this 1,000 times, the half of the story that you're not telling is what the other person received from you that made them say what they said. Yeah, you got angry when they said it, but what did you say in the first place? Or what did you do in the first place that made them say what they said? And by not telling the whole story, what you're doing is taking a story out of context. And in your own mind, you're having this discussion with your partner, explaining your side. Yes, you're blaming them, but you're also not telling the whole story. So even if they didn't remember the whole thing, they might even agree with you, I was bad. No, you weren't. There was something they did that made you say that. Which is why, by the way, when I do couples work, I do not have a couple talk to each other at all in front of me in a session until they are able to not do that. I separate people. Or I say, talk to me, so you're not leveling some problem at each other. And it'll usually be more superficial, like, what happened? Well, what happened before that? Now we get to what happened that caused your spouse to say what they said, which made you angry. Okay, now I get the whole picture. And number 15, predicting future problems because the implication you're incompetent. So, like, your investments aren't going to work. Well, thanks a lot. How do you know? You've got a crystal ball? See, it sounds like, well, you're just, you have an opinion. But it's not just an opinion. You're implying the other person is incompetent or stupid or, whatever, something irresponsible. Whatever, when you make a future prediction that's going to happen because of you, that's what it is. And number 16, implying that you are being lied to. Now, I lifted this one from my dissertation. It was another person. Her husband asked her a question, and she said, you've heard this before. Why are you asking me again? And this is how he answered her. Sometimes you tell me different stories. So I'm asking again because sometimes the same story has different lines in it, whatever suits you at that time. So the husband is implying that his wife is a liar. That's not nice, guys. Oh, this is number 16, actually, because we had that extra one before for number 7. That is not nice. That is covert abuse. When you keep doing these things, or a Chinese menu, pick this and pick this, one of these, two of these, it all adds up. Now, I just threw in, all right, we went over a little. Let me just quickly, I threw in a few more that I came up with. Number 17, negative body language. Number 18, lack of physical affection. Number 19, acting the opposite of all this bad stuff to others, meaning you're implying your spouse is lying, you imply to another person that they're honest as the day is long. You're acting to your spouse as if they have no skills for whatever it is that you're talking about in the future. Thing won't work, but you say to someone else they're brilliant at it, especially if you do it in front of them, then it really hurts. And finally, this is a cool one. Lavishing on that very spouse that you act abusive to, lavishing material gifts on them while withholding verbal or physical affection. That's crazy making, right? So now I covered all of them. There are actually 20. Right, I had 19, but there's actually 20 when you include the extra one contributed by you guys. So you see, when you start adding in, it enriches the presentation. Does anyone have any last minute? I've gone 36 minutes. Does anyone have any last minute additions, questions, or feedback of any kind? Or did I confuse you by having too many? Sometimes a lot of information becomes too much information. Uh-oh, no one is saying anything. Maybe that's not a good sign. All right, then, I will leave off. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.